So I have zoomed out a little bit so that you can see how I have my areas set up. I've got a towel underneath my image that I have mounted to my gator board, and of course I'm nice and taped down to the surface so it will hold the paper relatively flat. I have a hockey brush. It is a 1-inch goat hair brush, and that's how I'm going to get the water on. And I have 2 containers of water so that my water doesn't dirty up too quick. And I've got a little bit of the magenta, but mostly the yellow and the blue, and I have a lot of water added so that they're blending in together. And so now what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to wet this background. We're going to let it sink in a little bit, and then we're going to wet it again, and we're going to make sure that the paper is fully saturated. Then we're going to start picking up color, and we're going to be putting it on the surface. Now, keep in mind that rarely have I ever managed in the first pass to get the paint exactly the value that I want. It usually takes me a minimum of 2 passes. So I'm going to go ahead and start by adding some water on the paper. Make sure you have plenty of water, and then we're going to let this sink in. We're going to wait a minute or two and let it sink in. Then we're going to make another pass. So what happens is sometimes when you get your paper, and paper has sizing, Arches is 300 pound. It's internally and externally sized. All sizing means is that it helps the color stay on the surface of the paper, but we want the color to sink in. So I'm going to let this sink in a little bit, and sometimes when you're first putting your first layer, you can already see, obviously there wasn't as much sizing there as there are in the areas that are really shiny, but we're going to just go ahead and let it sink in. I'm going to clean off the edge. We're going to let that all sink in, and then I'm going to go over it again with some more water. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit, actually. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm going to add some more water. Go lightly when you have your brush on the surface of the paper. You don't want to be scrubbing, and because that will start to lift the fibers. We want these fibers to kind of stay flat. Okay, now let's look at the surface. Okay, now we're nice and glossy, except for up there. So let's get in a little bit more water up there. I'm feeling like we're pretty good. I'm gonna quickly lift off some of the water on the surface of the paper, or the tape. We don't want any water coming back in to the surface of the paper from the tape. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wet my brush now. My brush is pretty wet, and I'm going to come over to the yellow area. And I'm using my Cheap Joe's natural hairbrush for this. Okay, so just going to start moving that color around the paper. Now I'm going to come over by the blue. I have the color's just a little bit bluer. Now I'm going to pick that up. If your color is not moving around like this, then that means that you haven't had enough water sinking into the paper. Okay, now I'm going to put my brush down, and I'm going to let the color start to blend onto the surface of the paper. And let's quickly clean up the edge. Okay, now let's go ahead. Can you see how the color is just starting to float around? And then every once in a while you may have to pick up some on the surface of your masking fluid so it doesn't get too far into your image. Oops, I picked up a little, there we go. I'd accidentally touched the paper. See how the color's nice and smooth now? Everything's blending out, and the only reason it's able to do that is because the surface of my paper is extremely wet. It's allowing those colors to move and blend. Okay, so just picking up extra water and paint. Be very careful when you go right along the sides that you don't go in to the surface. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks. You can see everything's just getting nicely blended. So now what I want to do is I want to pick up my hair dryer and I'm going to very carefully circulate around, very carefully, a little bit at a time. I want to stay 6 to 8 inches away. I want my hair dryer on low and I want to keep my hair dryer circulating. I don't want to leave it stuck like that on one area. You want to move it around. Don't put it on high because you'll shoot color across your paper. Now this is going to take a while. It's probably going to take 5 minutes or so. And so we'll come back once all this is dry. So here's where I'm at now. And everything is completely dry. And how do I know everything is completely dry? And let me tell you, this is extremely important when you go and you're adding subsequent layers onto any layer below that. What you want to do is feel it with the back of your hand. This area that's painted should feel exactly the same as any other paper. If it feels cool to the back of your hand, that means that it's not dry all the way and the water's still evaporating. And keep in mind that, especially if you're not used to using 300-pound paper, it's a lot different than 140-pound paper. 140-pound paper dries quickly. And 300-pound paper, because it's thicker and that paint and the water have sunk down in the paper, it takes a lot longer to dry. So this probably took a good 8 minutes or so to completely dry. And then, of course, I let it cool off, and now I'm feeling it with the back of my hand, and everything feels good. Now, if I'm looking at that image, I want this to be toned down a little bit more. I want to get some grays, some blue grays in here, because I want that to contrast with the image if I were to have been painting that image. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab a smaller brush, and I am actually going to do this, and I will do this as a long tutorial. But again, I'm just doing this for you so you can practice on backgrounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this blue, and we're going to need a lot, just like we did with that first layer. We had lots and lots of paint. So I'm just going to rinse my brush. And now this time, I'm going to take quite a bit of that magenta. And I also have a piece of paper that I'm going to practice on. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to add the yellow right in there. What that does is I've now created like a navy, very, very unsaturated blue-gray. And that's the color that I want, because that's what I want to lay on top of this color. Make sure you mix enough up. I don't know how big your image is, so let's make sure you got a nice puddle going right in the middle. Let's try that again. Add a little bit more blue. And now just a little bit of that yellow to tone it down. And I might have gone too far. Let's see what happens now. Well, now it's really kind of blue-gray. So now let's pull some more of that over and see what happens when we do this. Let's see what happens when we add a little bit of water. So maybe back again with a little bit of yellow. Maybe even a little bit more of that magenta. Whoops, I had some magenta on the on my brush. I think that's perfect. We'll just go ahead and go with that. So the same thing. I'm going to take my hockey brush. I'm going to go right over the surface just like I did when we were doing the first wash. Now, because we've disturbed the sizing and because there's paint on the paper, this is going to dry much quicker. So I want to double check. I do not want this to look flat. I want it to be glossy because I want that color to move across the surface. So I'm just going to keep looking and making sure all areas are staying wet. So there we go. There's a little tiny bit maybe over here. And now let's clean up the edge quickly. Okay, now I'm going to turn it to the side and look again. And it looks like we've got plenty of water. So now I'm going to pick up my dragon's tongue brush. Needed to rinse it out, and I'm going to pick up some of this color. Oh my gosh, it was just perfect, wasn't it? Remember, I want this toned down. I don't want it competing with my foreground. Okay, let's set that down. Let's clean up the edge a little bit. Let's get a little bit more color right down in here. Okay, clean off the edge. All right, so now let's get that color to move around. I'm keeping an eye, making sure it's not going too far down into my masking fluid. I'm going to stop and clean up a little bit of the edge again. And right here. Now I'm going to pick up my smaller brush and I'm going to drop just a little bit more color right in here. And right up top. And same thing, let's clean up the edge. Okay, do the same thing. I love it when you get that airbrushed look. It's just so beautiful. All right, I'm gonna stop. Now I'm gonna go ahead and dry it. I'm pretty happy with how this background turned out. I like it because it's very subtle. It's not gonna compete if I were to be painting the foreground, and we achieved the goal of getting a nice, blended, soft, out of focus background. So what I want to do now is I want to take, this is old masking fluid, all balled up. I don't know what happened, but I have lost my rubber pickup tool. So You just making sure it's completely dry. It should not feel cool. It should feel like every other area of your paper. And then what you do is you just very lightly pull an edge of the masking fluid up. And if you have put the masking fluid on your paper correctly, it should do this. It should pull up. It won't necessarily pull up in one piece, but if you have done a good job in making sure that you had it nice and thick, you'll pretty much get it in one pass. And now, oh, see, and look at that right there. I had a little pinhole and I didn't see it, so some masking fluid got through. There's another little spot. Actually, that was good. There's another little one right there and right there. And that, oh, and see, there's one right there. And that, actually, you know what? It's a good thing that you saw that, because this is what happens when you don't pay attention and you have a little hole in your masking fluid. Now, is that going to be a big deal along this area? No, because if I were to be painting this right now, that's a very dark area. And then, of course, you've got your blues that would be in that little bluebird. But for the most part, masking came out pretty good. We have a few rough areas, but those are going to turn into feathers if and when I do this tutorial, and I think I will. But again, this was to show you how you get a nice, soft, out of focus background. So I'm going to call this a success, and I want to thank everybody for watching, and I'd love to see how your backgrounds turn out. And I will see you on the next tutorial.